My name's Rhiannon, and I'm the host of the Rio Knits podcast, which is a YouTube channel, YouTube series, where I talk about what I'm knitting and what I'm making, and sometimes other things. This is a different series, however, and I wanted to share with you, in honor of Me Made May, my slow fashion journey. This is, very personal. I've been a knitter for 6 years and I've learned more than I ever anticipated. In some ways, being a knitter has completely changed my life. The way I live every day is different now. Through the knitting community, I've learned about slow fashion and built the confidence as well as the skills to make my own clothing. Knowing I can make my own clothes has changed how I shop, how I view style, the role of style, or the purpose of fashion in my life. And I want to just invite you to join me for an in-depth discussion of my personal slow fashion journey. This will be a 5-part series in which I share with you different aspects about my personal slow fashion journey. So let's start with a little overview and intro. I am a knitter. I've been knitting for 6 years. I've been sewing pretty much my whole life. My grandma taught me how to use a sewing machine when I was really young, but I've been sewing garments for myself for about 3 years. And really it was learning how to construct garments through knitting that helped me figure out and decide that I could, in fact, construct garments by sewing. A lot of times I think people come to it the other way, but everyone's journey is different, right? So again, this is a 5-part series. In this episode, I want to share about self-love and self-care because I think that's a really great place to start. But in further episodes, I'm going to talk about sustainability and the environment and how that plays together with slow fashion. I'm going to talk about developing a personal style, which I think is really something we don't talk about enough, especially as knitters. I'm going to talk about shopping, making, and remaking, which is kind of my experience at the moment. And then I'm going to end with an episode where I just talk about who's inspired me, who's influenced me, and give you some resources around slow fashion. So if you are new and this terminology is new to you, I'll just say slow fashion is sort of a philosophy that is in opposition basically to fast fashion. So what is fast fashion? Fast fashion is this consumer-driven seasonal cycles, multiple seasons a year, not just the 4 seasons, weather, climate stuff, but like this idea that every week you should have something new. There's new trends all the time. You should be, changing your clothing, not only what you wear, but like what you own constantly, right? Like even what you own. So you buy it, you wear it once, you throw it away. And slow fashion is sort of a way of stepping back from that and saying, is that really, first of all, it's terrible for the environment, so it's not sustainable. But is it sustainable even from a perspective of my own sense of style or my own sense of well-being, or like, do I enjoy any of these clothes, and why do I not have clothes that I enjoy? Why do I have to follow trends instead of, following my own instinct? So, that's kind of the idea behind slow fashion. A lot of people in the knitting community do not consider themselves to be, I guess, engaged in the slow fashion movement, but a lot of people do. It really is, just person to person. There is definitely an element of knitting and the knitting community that is just as much driven by consumerism as it is by the desire to make, beautiful things for yourself. So I want to talk about all of that in this series. And I want to just, present it in kind of shorter videos because I think that it's worth looking at all of these things in greater detail. I'm not going to be able to look at the camera all the time because I've taken really extensive notes, and that's just me not wanting to miss anything. So I will be looking at my notes a lot. I apologize if that bothers you. again, this is a YouTube channel. I think it's probably clear I'm not a professional entertainer. But I just really want to share with you and be as thorough as I can. So I've taken good notes. So let's start with self-love and self-care. I want to talk about self-love because I think that fashion teaches us to hate ourselves fundamentally. I think that the clothes we purchase or attempt to purchase, traditionally, that has been about making you feel insecure so that you will buy more. That's kind of the essence of what consumer culture is. And I don't think that people who don't make their own clothes realize what a wellspring of self-love making things for your body can be. I think it's something I even discovered sort of incidentally almost, because I started knitting and I was, like a lot of people, I was knitting, things that I thought were cool looking, right? Like it started for me with like a pattern that had some cool textured stitches in it and wanting to like learn that. And then I started knitting lace and I would make like lace scarves or whatever. And it took me a while to make a garment. And when I finally made a pullover, I made the Flax by Tin Can Knits, which is a great beginner pattern. It's free, it's wonderful. It comes in like every size from newborn baby to, a generous sized adult. It was a surprise to me to find that I felt so good wearing something I had made for myself. And I immediately wanted to do it again. So, here I am wearing a sweater that I made for myself. This is more of like a summer top. It's not 100% wool. It's wool and cotton. But there's something about making things for yourself that I think increases your awareness of your body in a really positive way, and not just your body as something to be viewed, but your body as something that you are living in and experiencing the world through. So just like 3 big themes here is that when I prioritize my happiness, it is an act of love and healing. I'll get into that. Number 2, how I feel about my body and how I treat my body because of my feelings. Number 3, the way that clothes help me explore or understand aspects of my identity. So the biggest hurdle, I think, to making your own clothing is really deciding that you are worth your time, your money, your intellectual energy, so to speak, which another way of saying time, talent, and treasure, right? That like to clothe your body is worth all of those things. And I think that we live in a culture that absolutely tells us that it's not worth it, right? That you should just go and buy whatever's easiest and slap it on your body and get on with your life, right? That there's nothing about making clothing that is worth the time, the expense. And often I think people assume that when you make something, that if it's homemade, that it's somehow inexpensive, that it's like thrifty to be making your own clothes. Let me tell you, it is not. And the amount of money I spend per garment has dramatically increased since I started making my own clothes. However, the amount of mileage, so to speak, I get out of each thing has also dramatically increased. So I think for me, there was a big shift that occurred when I made my first sweater because I bought nice yarn. I bought yarn that was spendy, and it felt like out of my comfort zone to spend, $130 or whatever on not a completed sweater, but like yarn for a sweater. If you come from a background where you have ever had to like pinch pennies or, live on a budget, be thrifty, you know what I mean when you look at the cost of like, this is just for the materials. This isn't even the finished object. So there's a monetary cost and there's a time cost. So it was, you know, maybe $130 worth of yarn plus needles, plus all the time I had knitted before in learning things, plus, you know, if I had paid for a pattern, there would have been a pattern cost, which is, you know, usually pretty nominal, but still it's cost. Other tools that I needed. And then it took me months to make that first sweater. And I had to like really read the pattern and pay attention. So there was coin, there was time, there was intellectual energy going into that. And I think there's something even deeper for certain people, depending on what your body is like. The messages about your body that you receive from society can be really, really hurtful, you know, depending on things like your age, your race, your skin color, the texture of your hair, your size, your shape, the, you know, whether your body is considered to be normal or abnormal in any way, or desirable or undesirable. I mean, we know what these standards are, right? We know that beauty standards are very, very narrow. And when you spend your whole life being told that your body is wrong, that there's something wrong with it, that your body basically represents failure, failure to be something different or to do something different. And then you also live in a society that does not value clothing at all, that sees clothing as disposable, that sees the people who make clothing as disposable too. That pretty openly mocks people who sew things in ways. And when I say mock, I think, yeah, like people have really been rude about, oh, you made that, or, oh, it's homemade, that must mean it's cheap, you know, or just like that sort of patronizing, like, cute little lady, look at you with your cute little lady crafts, right? All of those things I think are a huge barrier to making your own clothing. But once you start doing it, you start to realize that there's so much bias against your body and against you loving your body, basically. Like, there's so many ways that our culture puts up barriers for you to acknowledge the body that you have and to love it for what it is. If you have never seen this video, I say go watch it right now. So The Fat Squirrel Speaks, Amy Beth is a YouTuber. She's amazing. She's really smart. She's very thoughtful and deep and intellectual and like intuitive with her making, and talks about it a lot. And she has a video called A Path to Knitworthy. And it's specifically about, you know, feeling as a woman and as a plus size woman, that you are just like so worthless, right? And then feeling like, you know, the additional barriers are, well, when you're larger, you have to buy more yarn, you have to knit more stitches. And so it feels kind of unfair that there's like, oh, I have to do more work to accommodate the body that I'm in. But how that changes, right, when you actually do the work. And so, you know, for me, I think the biggest struggles are, you know, just the impacts of fat phobia in our culture. Also, ageism. Ageism is really big. I'm in my late 30s. I'm not what I consider to be very old, but there is definitely, I think, a strong cultural inclination to value very, very young women who are actually still kind of girls, and that their bodies and the kinds of bodies that you can have when you're 20 years old have way more value and cultural currency than the bodies that you have later in life. And then I think there's also this sort of, I'll just call it a thing about motherhood and how Motherhood becomes a convenient excuse for just aging. That happens to all of us, whether or not we have children. So it almost becomes like you're a double failure because you're not young and thin, and you also don't have children. So like, why are you fat and wrinkly? You haven't had kids. What's your excuse? Well, time. That's my excuse. And it's so interesting how, you know, a big mindset shift for me was when I started to make my own clothes. I was making clothes that fit my body instead of expecting my body to fit into clothes. And I notice now that when I shop and I go and I try something on, if it doesn't fit my body, I no longer feel bad about my body. I used to think, ugh, why don't I fit in this? Why am I too short for these pants? Why am I too short for all the pants? Now I think, why are all these pants too long? Who decided that they needed to be this long? Who decided that everybody in my size must be this tall, or else what? You're a failure as a woman? Whatever. And I think there's something really just powerful about how you start to acknowledge yourself and confront yourself and realize that there's nothing wrong with you, right? Like, this is just how you are. And through that, you have to start letting go of things. And I think this is also a big act of self-love. And this is really where the self-love starts to get very deep. When you start to confront what your body is, because when you're making a garment, you're dealing with measurements, right? So you are dealing with numbers, but you're not dealing with small, medium, large, right? You're dealing with, this is what my bust measurement is at my armpit. This is what my full bust measurement is. This is what my waist measurement is. This is what my hips are at the widest point. This is what my hips are at the widest point when I sit down and things shift around, right? You start to confront those numbers and you start to realize that they're just numbers, right? And they could be different numbers. And that doesn't matter. The point is that the garment needs to be the right number to fit you. And then so you start to get rid of some, I would say, limiting beliefs. So you start to let go of limiting beliefs about your own power, your own talent, your own skills, and your own worth. You start to let go of some limiting beliefs about the impact that your fashion choices have. What I mean by that is that suddenly things are available in every color, every pattern. You are no longer being forced to choose between the store where the clothes fit or the store where the clothes almost fit, but they're really cute and I like the colors they have. Or I guess I can't buy anything this season because everything is a shade that looks terrible with my coloring or whatever. And I say this as somebody who has lived through the phases where for whatever reason, everything is like cantaloupe and kiwi colored in a year. And it's just like really frustrating. And you're like, okay, whatever. But it's like you can make fashion choices based on what you like, basically, instead of what's available to you. And I think especially for people who are plus sized or who have a body that just doesn't fit the norm, that's huge. If most clothes never fit you or never feel like you, and suddenly you have the option to just make something and you're like, oh, okay, I go to the fabric store, there's 800 colors, right? And there's never not a color that I would like. So, you have more options, you just do. And so that it can be kind of a limiting belief that because of the way I am, I don't have enough options. And I have to change something about myself in order to open up my options. Well, no, you don't. You do, but the thing you have to change is your willingness to take the time and spend the money to make yourself something that you'll love. And then there's other things that you have to let go of as you start to make things for yourself. Because I found that I started to pick up speed, so to speak. I started to be like, okay, now I have plans for like my next 10 things that I want to make, right? And they're all for me. And so you have to let go of spending your time on other people, which I think can be also very big if you have been socialized to believe that your value depends on your willingness to dedicate every waking minute to somebody else. This is something that I think women and people who are socialized as women experience a lot. We're trained from birth basically to care more about other people than about ourselves. And you don't really know how to say no, right? It's like no is almost not in your vocabulary because you've been taught to say yes to what other people need. And so, you know, for me, this has shown up as people say, oh, could you knit me a hat? And I say, no, no. Hey, I noticed you like knitting. Do you want to make me this? No, I do not. And I think that people are really taken aback by that. But the reality is there's a huge investment that goes into making things, and don't you dare devalue my work by just asking me casually as if you're asking me to, you know, I don't know, hand you a tissue or something, like something that would be easy to do. You know, I think people don't realize that what they're asking is, first of all, it sounds kind of like, would you make me a sandwich? You know, and then secondly, it takes way longer than making a sandwich. And it costs a lot of money. and maybe your financial and temporal priority is not somebody else. And I think that can be, it's been really liberating in my life. So I guess I need to keep centering this on me because this is my journey, but I've found that it's been very liberating in my life to just be like, my priority is me now. That's what I spend my spare time on. That's what I spend my spare dollars on. That's, you know, I will even prioritize learning a new knitting technique over learning something, you know, purely for capitalist reasons, like, oh, this could advance my career or whatever, but like, I don't have to do it, right? Like, I'm okay. My job's okay. You know, I don't need to change jobs right now or whatever. Like, those are the kind of decisions I've made in the past where it's like, I'm going to actually spend my creative energy and my learning budget, so to speak, of how much my brain can take in on myself, on things that I want. So yeah, all of that stuff happens. I want to end by talking about self-care because as far as self-care goes, making clothes for your body means that more often than not, in my case, I've been choosing things that offer physical comfort and psychological comfort. So that can be as simple as just like what feels good on my body, right? I like, turns out, you know, I mean, I probably knew this before. I have opinions about the length of sleeves. I have opinions about, you know, when do I want a sweater that's like oversized and slouchy? When do I want something that's fitted or cropped or whatever? You know, what feels good? What goes with, you know, like, for instance, this top and this skirt go together, and that I'm very physically comfortable in a way that I think clothes that I could buy don't offer that level of comfort. That can be due to the fabric I've chosen or the yarn I've chosen if I'm knitting it. It can be due to the cut of the garment, the way it fits, etc. It's a lot, but basically I feel like I spend way more time being physically comfortable than I ever did before I made my own clothes. And it's kind of sad, but I realized when I started making my own clothes how much ready-to-wear fashion was making me like physically uncomfortable. You know, things that just didn't fit right on the shoulders. And, you know, if you've ever had something where the shoulder doesn't fit right or something, and it just tugs all day and you can't stop thinking about it. It drives you nuts. Or, you know, socks with like a huge seam across the toe, you know, pants that are a little too tight in the crotch, you know, like all of these things, right? Like there are a lot of ways that clothes can be really uncomfortable. And if you don't make your own clothes, you basically have to put up with whatever's out there, and how that fits. I think there's also an element of psychological comfort that comes from making your own clothes. And I want to talk about that a little bit because it's hard to define, but some of it is just from knowing that you look nice in something, feeling confident about the way you look. And some of it is more of like feeling like the thing you are wearing is authentic to you. That it affirms your identity, that it makes you feel prepared for the moment that you're in, right? So for me, it's things like the length of a skirt. When I was buying ready-to-wear skirts, I would find that a lot of times they were too long or too short. And while a skirt that's too short could be physically comfortable, it was psychologically very uncomfortable because I spent all day worrying about the way I was sitting, the way I was moving, etc. And now I make all of my skirts right below the knee to midi length. So I guess T length, midi length, maybe maxi length, but also I don't have to worry about tripping on it because I will make a maxi skirt that fits my short legs. So, you know, that can be like an element of psychological comfort, you know, of just like, I know that I'm free to like move around in this outfit and like nothing bad will happen. Nothing's going to tear, nothing's going to flash, nothing's going to shift and then be uncomfortable for hours, you know. And I think that confidence really comes from comfort. You know, when you feel uncomfortable, it's very hard to be confident. And when you're not feeling confident, it's very hard to be present. And so, you know, that can like really affect your work performance, for example, or, you know, whether you can fully engage in an activity that you wanted to do, right? If you've ever tried to hike with your toes being pinched, you know exactly what I mean. And I think also, you know, there's a bit about style and your personal style and how your style evolves over time. I think a lot of people, myself included, you know, I definitely get comfort from having things that feel like my style, right? And I don't have words to describe my style because it's not something I could just name like, oh yes, my style is classic or, you know, sporty or whatever. Like, I think those style typologies are not useful, and I'll get, you know, well, I'll get into that in the episode about developing a personal style. But essentially the way I feel in my clothes is like I can have things that really feel authentically me. And I think this skirt is a great example of that. I thought for years I didn't like pattern. Let me show you this pattern. It's this really cool, it's a really cool Ankara print. So Ankara is fabric traditionally from West Africa. Traditional is an interesting word because obviously not all of it is produced the way it was produced 500 years ago, but for at least 100 years or more, artisans in West Africa have been creating like a wax dye resist process fabric that often has lots of color, big repeating patterns. It's usually on a nice like medium weight, almost like the weight of a quilting cotton, but a little heavier. And it's double-sided. So here's the inside of the skirt. here's the outside, right? There's no like light side, dark side. And so these kind of prints, I became aware of these kind of prints when my wife did a study abroad in college in Ghana, and then brought me back like an apron and some other things. And I was like, this is my kind of print, because it comes in lots of colors. There's often like gold thread or sparkle or something like exciting going on. It runs the full gamut from like very abstract patterns to patterns that are more, you know, just like florals or something. And, you know, to make a long story short, I feel like most of the prints that were presented to me in the ready to wear fashion that I knew of before that were like either tiny little like ditzy prints or something very simple like stripes, Swiss dot, polka dot, you know, kind of conventional, sometimes verging on boring, or it was like, there's like a category that I think fat people know of, which is like fat girl business casual, and it's like just fugly, like there's no other word for it. And so like, you know, being presented with like, these are your options for prints, and then being like, I hate all of those. Here was me thinking I only liked solid colors, and then I started making my own clothes, and I learned about this like whole fabric tradition from West Africa, which like I wish I had known about years before, because these fabrics are beautiful. They look good on everybody, you know, and the sky's the limit with what you can do. So I think there's just something like an element of psychological comfort that I get in knowing that I can have like, oh, I do like prints. I'm just particular about prints. I like certain prints in certain colors. And, you know, I find that I like to match something, you know, very feminine with something that's maybe a little more edgy. I don't like to go like, you know, all in one direction, I guess, on the like gender spectrum. If you know, consider it a spectrum, I don't know if that's useful or not, but you know, it's like, I don't want to have like a skirt that's like pink and frilly and whatever, and then just wear it with a shirt that's pink and frilly. You know, I think I have a romantic angle to my style, but I also like things to be a little more like toned down in terms of the femininity of it. I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but the way I think of it is like little children's play clothes. That's my style. I think, you know, the clothes that are like presented for like little children to wear are like, there can be things that are girly, but they're not like, you know, they're not over the top, and they're also not about the male gaze, usually. And so I think, yeah, like there's just something nice about knowing that I have, you know, the ability to make things that are like, this is the exact right amount of classic I want, or the right amount of romantic that I want, or the right amount of feminine or masculine that I want in a garment. And I think that does, that really does affirm us when we feel like we're wearing the clothes that fit us right mentally, right? So yeah, so, you know, final words on that, I think. I just wanted to, you know, talk a little bit about that, and I would love to hear what you think if you make your own clothes. How do they make you feel in comparison to clothes that you can buy? And what has making for your own body taught you about loving yourself, or, you know, caring for yourself? I would love to hear that. I think that, you know, all of this stuff is connected, and just like as my body changes as I get older, I find that there are differences in, say, my base temperature, how I experience weather, things like that. And knowing that I can, like, it might take some time, it might cost more money, but like I can have the thing that will be perfect for that circumstance is wonderful. It gives me a lot of peace of mind, and it makes me feel like it's okay. You know, it's okay that I'm for some reason 10 degrees colder all the time in the winter than I was when I was 20 years old. That's fine. I'll knit a warmer sweater, you know. I think there's like this self-awareness and self-acceptance that really can't be beat. So thank you if you've watched this is a little longer than I thought it would be, but I really appreciate you being here, and I hope that you will stay tuned for the next episode, which is about sustainability and environmentalism with regards to slow fashion. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.